Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nico Koopman. I'm acting as Vice Rector for Social Impact, Transformation and Personnel, and it is indeed a privilege to welcome you here on behalf of our management and to welcome you also on behalf of the Transformation Office of Stellenbosch University and the Women's Forum, who jointly organized this great event. May I specifically welcome our guest speaker for this afternoon. She will be officially introduced to you in full by Professor Amanda Gous, but a preliminary word already of welcome to you, Advocate Thulisile Madonsela. Then welcome to our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Wim de Villiers, and his wife Catherine. I also saw Catherine here. Very welcome to you. Welcome to other members of management at this great event. And then very welcome to all our staff members who are present here, all our students who are present, and also members of the Stellenbosch University Women's Forum. Welcome to each one of you, and if you are members from other institutions, we also say welcome to members of neighboring institutions. We saw some of them also here just before we entered. We are gathered here to celebrate. In the month of August, we celebrate the women of our continent, and in particular, we celebrate the women of South Africa. Celebration is a human practice, a coordinated, communal, coherent, consistent activity in which we engage for the sake of the good that it embodies inherently, but also for the sake of the good that celebration, the practice of celebration, advances. We celebrate the women of our country, and through that celebration, we seek to enjoy the good of and in our women, and we advance the good that we all strive for. We all work for a society that is free from racism, from sexism, classism, homophobia, handicapism, ageism, ecocide. This is our transformation. And today we hope that this event of celebration will enhance our journey of transformation. I would like to call on Professor Amanda Gous, one of the champions for justice, specifically also justice in gender context, to welcome and introduce our speaker, Amanda.
Good afternoon. I'm so excited to see so many of you here. Welcome. Advocate Madonsela, Professor de Villiers, Professor Koopman. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Advocate Madonsela on behalf of the Women's Forum as our special guest for Women's Month. It's the month in which we celebrate the march of nearly 20,000 women to the union buildings to demand equality, and where the women have coined the phrase, "If you strike a woman, you strike a rock." Last year, the Women's Forum nominated Advocate Madonsela for an honorary doctorate, which she received, and so today we also celebrate this achievement with her. Advocate Madonsela doesn't really need any introduction. We know her as our courageous and fearless public protector, but please allow me to say a few words about her. Advocate Madonsela is a human rights and constitutional lawyer, equality expert and policy specialist with over 2 decades of experience. Her postgraduate studies include LLM studies and legal courses in the area of equality, administrative justice, legal drafting, and public administration. As one of the drafters of South Africa's post-apartheid constitution, she forfeited a Harvard scholarship to focus on her constitution drafting role as one of the technical advisors that worked with the National Assembly in drafting the current constitution, showing her commitment to a democratic South Africa. Some of her previous positions include in the Department of Justice, Project Manager on Equality Legislation, Education and Training, Chief Director in the Department of Justice for Transformation and Equality, Deputy Director Planning in the Department of Justice, Technical Expert in the Constitutional Assembly, and a part-time lecturer at the Wits School Center for Applied Legal Studies. It gives me great pleasure, Advocate Madonsela. We're looking forward to hear you.
Program Director, Professor Koopman, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Stellenbosch, Professor Wim de Villiers, the leadership of the university as a whole, and a special word of greeting to Professor Amanda Gous. Greetings from the Public Protector South Africa team. I am sincerely grateful and honored to be invited to participate in the difficult conversation you are having on transformation, which is curiously referred today as a decolonization project. Firstly, I just want to say I've had a marvelous time this morning with the young ones from a forum called Living Life and Learning, something like that. For me, that encounter I had this morning just underscores that if you ever feel depressed about where we are as a nation, 21 years into democracy, or if you feel just overwhelmed about where the world as a whole is going in terms of global governance and whether Africa is rising or falling, take some time off and sit with the young ones, the late teens to early 30s. Every time I do that, I come out energized because I get a sense that they're not focusing on what are our weakest links. They seem to have read Khalil Gibran better than us grown-ups, that you're not just as weak as your weakest link, but you are also as strong as your strongest link. I always get a sense that they know that we are a nation of resilient people and that we have faced far greater challenges than we face today. And we've always been greater than those challenges. And we've always come out better than we were before those challenges. So I was energized. If you need the same energy, I'm sure though you get the same energy because you're in the academy all of your time. Just thank you again to the Transformation Office and to the Women's Forum for extending this constructive engagement platform, not just to me, but to all of us to continue the difficult conversation that this university is having, the entire nation is having, and incidentally, the whole world is having the same conversation. The reality is that if we don't allow a difficult conversation to take place, it usually does take place. And when it takes place, having forced itself to take place, usually the aftermath is more difficult to do. Lao Tzu once said, "A great general is the one who wins the war without firing a single shot. But a better general is the one who wins in such a way that there is no war and that win-win results are achieved." And he was a general himself. It's quite interesting that people have been involved in war. They don't think war is the solution to society because they know that you may win a battle, but that doesn't mean you have won the war. And that usually the cost of a war far exceeds the gains from the war. When I talk about a war, I don't mean always a physical war. Emotional wars are as costly as physical ones. The African Union has come up with a program that it calls Silencing the Guns in Africa by 2020, which incidentally is less than 5 years from now. I attended one of their conferences, and the aim is to silence all guns, not just the literal ones, but just social unrest in the continent in whatever form it takes. Because the African Union believes that to achieve the objectives of Agenda 2063, we need a continent that is not ravaged by war and social unrest. The focus on women's role in the decolonization project and leading the social justice discourse couldn't be more timely. We are in Women's Month. We're still left with another 3 days or so of Women's Month, and that's the month, as Professor House indicated, we celebrate the giant footprint left in the entire world by a few women leading 20,000 women, driven by the audacity of hope, the power of love, and the power of faith. They didn't have any cell phones, Twitter, Mexit, or any of these new channels we have to communicate, but they managed to bring together 20,000 women from all the racial groupings, the way we were grouped there, Indian, colored, African, and white, and from all the geographic spaces in this country. We never hear about them having broken anything. We never hear about them having fought. We just hear that there was this powerful man. There was this powerful match. That's what happens when we are driven by the audacity of hope, the power of love, and the power of faith. Faith in yourself as an agent of change. Faith in humanity, that they will join you in your crusade. And faith in the people you are fighting against, that they will hear you. I believe that spirit is still here with us. That's why you are having this conversation. That's why you have brought us together today. And I'm certain that you didn't just bring us together here today. It's an ongoing conversation about the role each one of us can play in bringing about social justice in the world we live in. I must confess, though, that I nearly didn't come. On Monday, I asked my diary secretary, Busisiwe, to find a substitute for me. And as usual, I asked the Deputy Pub Protector and I asked the Chief Executive Officer. And in that order, I asked then the Provincial Public Protector representative. The first two were already deployed elsewhere. The third one, we couldn't find her, or they couldn't find her in the morning. Had I managed not to come, the conclusion you are likely to have drawn would have been that I decided to snub the university because of the storm that is taking place at this university. You may also have arrived at the conclusion that I'm a coward. I didn't want to dirty my hands in the middle of the storm. I wanted to keep the Public Protector brand untainted by the storm. I wouldn't blame you. When there's no information, people arrive at whatever conclusion makes sense. The reality, though, is I was oblivious to the storm. Those who follow me on Twitter, you would know that, or we follow each other on Twitter, you know that I haven't tweeted for a long time. If I ever tweet, I tweet just one thing. I hardly read my Twitter account. I hardly watch TV. And when I read newspapers, I often just look at the headlines and make up the rest, as makes sense. So that's how I had missed the storm. Whilst Busisiwe was busy trying to look for an alternative, I then, sitting there with my free hands for a moment, went through my Twitter account. Then I discovered there's a storm going on here. And by the time she came back to tell me that she can't, the other two are saying no, she hasn't found number 3, I then said to her, no, it wouldn't look good if I don't go there. But another reason I felt compelled to come was the fact that I am an alumni of this university. So forgive me for being oblivious to what are you going through. But I did feel that I'm a member of this community in some way, and I have to make it. And the reason I would not have come is that my daughter was admitted to hospital on Monday. And she didn't understand. I was in Durban when she went in, and she didn't understand that now I have to go to Cape Town again. And when we were having those difficult conversations with her, I felt that there's a message that's being sent that talk, motherhood, which one do you go? You need to come back here. But anyway, I was able to go back to Pretoria and see her and then come here. So in the end, I was able to do all of it, and I am grateful for that. Why have we been brought here together, and why do people participate in difficult conversations, and why have women of this country been involved in the crusades for equality and broader social justice? Perhaps we might find an answer in a poem that has been discussed by over 1 million people worldwide, and I have made reference to it at least more than 5 times in this country. Forgive me if I've told you about it, but I thought it was appropriate to discuss it today again. It's a poem by James Patrick Kinney. It goes under the title, The Cold Within. He says that there were 6 people trapped by happenstance. They were all sitting around a fire on a cold, dark, bitter night. And as the fire was dying, each one of them had a piece of wood or a log in their hands. The first person looked at the dying fire and looked at their log and looked at the people she was sitting with. She saw somebody who was not from her church, and she decided, no, I'm not going to let this person who is not from my church to benefit from my log. The second person, a very rich man, looked across and saw a person and said, the lazy poor. I can't let them benefit. I can't let him benefit from my log. And he chose to keep his log. The poor person, not knowing the conversation in the head of the rich man, looked at the rich man across and said, "The filthy rich that are always exploiting us, I'm not letting him benefit from my log of wood." Then another person looked across and saw somebody that he regarded as somebody who's coming from a historically advantaged group, and said, "This man belongs to a group that has been exploiting us all of these years. I can't have him now exploit my log of wood, my log. I'm going to keep it," and he kept it. Then there was another man who had never done anything except for gain, the mercenary. He looked at all of these people and said, "None of them has money and is going to pay me." He looked at his log and decided, "I'm going to keep it." James Kinney says that at the end of it all, they still had their logs in their cold hands, in death. And then he says they didn't die from the cold without, they died from the cold within. I am encouraged by the fact that here, though, we're having good people here in South Africa and in the world in general. But know that as human beings, we are interconnected. Women globally and in this country have always appreciated the interconnectedness of humanity. They've always appreciated that I can't harm you or let you suffer without being adversely affected. If you do suffer, I will feel it, even if I look the other way, like those people in Phil Collins' song, Another Day in Paradise. Even if you look the other way, suffering does continue to bother you. Women globally and in our country have crusaded for equality and broader social justice, driven by love, driven by faith in what they're doing, and driven by hope that there must be a better way. There must be a better way where I don't have to close my eyes so as not to see human suffering. But also there must be a better way to ensure that I don't harm people or allow them to be harmed, because harmed people, hurting people, or wounded people tend to be dangerous. If you've seen the movie The Phantom of the Opera, there's a point at which that guy, the Phantom, when asked by the beautiful, caring young girl why he's killing people, he says, "Why should I show compassion to them? For the world has never showed compassion to me." So think about all of those people that get involved in terrorism and in all forms of brutality against humanity, and wonder whether some of them would have engaged in that if they were not wounded souls, who themselves feel that society has thrown them off board. It is this that I believe drove two women in this country that were born towards the end of the 19th century and made their mark at the beginning of the 20th century. And all they spoke about, or mostly spoke about, was social justice. And it wasn't social justice for women. Sometimes the mistake we make as women is to only worry about women's equality. But these women did not concern themselves about women getting power, about the plight of women. They just concerned themselves about humanity, that everyone deserves a better deal. You know, the better deal that our Constitution now promises, an improved quality of life for every person and freed potential of every person. They asked for that towards the end of the 19th century, right until the beginning of the 20th century. I'm certain that you already know them. One was a novelist who wrote, among other things, one of her books is not really a novel, one is a novel, The Story of an African Farm. Now you know. And then the other one, which is not a novel, is Thoughts on South Africa. And underpinning that are issues of development and issues of social justice. We recently heard people talking about roads must fall. She was one of the few people, she's the only person I know in this country who took on Cecil John Rhodes and said, racism is wrong, sexism is wrong, God created people as equal, and that when people go 6 feet under, there's no difference regarding the size of a coffin. That was Olive Schreiner. Around the same time, Charlotte Maxeke was born. First African woman to get a degree. She too was not just concerned about the rights of women. In fact, she was least concerned about the rights of women. She was just concerned about the rights of all human beings. She focused a lot of her energies on the justice system. But the justice system should not treat people identically if they're not identically situated. You know, what we talk now about substantive equality, she knew about substantive equality then, and she asked that the courts should adapt their treatment of mothers to the circumstances of mothers, and they should adapt their treatment of children to the circumstances of children. What we call today child justice, you will see in the writings of Charlotte Maxeke, born at the end of the 19th century and writing at the beginning of the 20th century. She too took a powerful precedent, like Olive Schreiner, who engaged with Rhodes, of course unfavorably, with unfavorable reactions from fellow human beings because she was ahead of her time. Charlotte Maxeke requested to meet with the president at the time. I'm certain that people thought she was crazy, but she did get that meeting. And she led a march against past laws being extended to women around 1930. I believe that the core, or at the core of the spirit of these women is really beyond what I've said about them being driven by love. It's really the spirit of Ubuntu. Justice Yvonne Mukgoro making a decision in the Constitutional Court case of S versus Makwanyane said that the value of Ubuntu is the essence of the constitutional provision on human dignity. I'm certain you'll agree with me that if I don't respect your human dignity or allow your human dignity to be degraded, my own human dignity is at stake. That's basically the essence of what Makwanyane said. And I think that was the spirit of Ubuntu. I am because you are because I am. That drove Olive Schreiner, Charlotte Maxeke, and the women who came after them to crusade for equality and broader social justice. They were not the only ones. There's been many in this country, women that have taken on the system and society and our society to to embrace social justice for our own common good. There are even those among us that I call the heroes among us that continue to push the frontiers of freedom further, particularly to ensure that everyone truly enjoys that improved quality of life and has their potential freed. And that where you were born into is not where you are trapped for the rest of your life. There's a woman from this neighborhood. This is Stellenbosch. She's a super cheese kid, that's what I would call her. Or that's what we call people who were born rich. They call them in the township cheese kids. So she's a super cheese kid, not just a cheese kid, she's a super cheese kid. She decided to become a modern Robin Hood. But she does not crusade with a literal sword, the one Robin Hood used. Her sword is the justice system. But like the original Robin Hood, she takes from the rich and gives back to the poor. You already know who I'm talking about if you are a resident of Stellenbosch. Who am I talking about? Wendy Applebaum. I thought everyone is going to scream, Wendy Applebaum. Yes. She started with the auction industry, which has all of those charade auctions. And people lose their homes through a charade auction. And she recently won a case against unscrupulous lenders who have abused actually social justice to exacerbate poverty, because legislation extended credit to those previously excluded from credit facilities. So that was a good thing. But they've used those people, the fact that some of those people who are coming for the first time into this credit scenario, they don't know how the rules work. I mean, when I was growing up as a black person, I was not allowed credit. Think about that. My generation, not even the previous generation. We were only, what was introduced during my time was something called a lay-by. So it stayed at the shop, you paid for it, you collected it when you were done. So these people have never been introduced to credit. They're coming into credit for the first time. They come there to borrow money for school fees or something for a child. You, as an unscrupulous lender or predatory lender, you say to them, no, you need the cell phone as well so that you can receive the SMSs and you can send money via SMS. Grandpa or grandmother Dlamini accepts this arrangement. It looks like a good arrangement. And then you don't tell him that you can actually buy the 200 rand cell phone because all you're going to do is to send cell messages. I mean, grandpas don't tweet. They don't use Facebook. And they don't use many of the other things that these things use. But some of the unscrupulous lenders would make them buy, or a lot of them would make them buy iPhones. I can barely use an iPhone. Now, Grandpa uses an iPhone, but what does it mean? The debt is increased. From the capital debt for the school fees to now this enormous debt, and then eventually they fail to pay it because the circumstances would not allow them. Their money is already stretched. That's why they're here to start with, to borrow money, because already they are stretched. Now they have to pay, they default, then they get a garnishee order against them. In some of those garnishee orders, they found that they took even more money than was owed, and they just kept going on. So she took this matter. She didn't have to take it. She took it. But why did she take it? It's because of Ubuntu and because crusading for justice does not necessarily make you an angel. It makes you somebody who loves yourself. You don't want to look the other way when you see suffering because it takes away your own joy. So to maintain your own joy, you alleviate human suffering. Then you can walk without looking the other way, as Phil Hall. So that's the same, basically, that's what women in this country have done for over the years. I could count thousands of them. A lot of them don't have streets named after them. Shulamith Muller. Does anyone know her? She lost her license to practice because she decided to join the Crusade for Justice. She didn't have to. She was also a cheese girl. Didn't have to join. Race Simon, Sisi Gu, Priscilla Chana. You know, they are the ones that you all know. The Helen Joseph, Helen Suzman, Winnie Mandela, Bettina Sisulu. A lot of women. A lot of them, you'll see that even if they were black, born into this socially stratified society, they were the upper cut of that disadvantaged group. So they could have been okay without joining the struggle. Charlotte Maxeke is one of those. Albertina Sisulu, a nurse. Winnie Mandela, a social worker. I could count a lot of them. From all society, Sisiku was a lawyer. She could have just practiced law and earned her money and not bothered anyone. But why did they care? And why have they crusaded? As I see it, is that it's because they cared about themselves, they loved society, and had faith in humanity. I have a sense, though, and I am certain that UK, firstly, as I indicated, that's why you are here. Secondly, I'm certain that you are joining the difficult conversations that are happening in this university and also in society about social justice. And I'm certain that you are concerned about the fact that we are in a country that adopted a constitution that promises everyone, not some, everyone, an improved quality of life and freed potential. Yet in that society, two things have happened in 21 years. We have become the most unequal society in the entire world, with a constitution that promises the achievement of equality and this improved quality of life. But secondly, a lot of lives have improved. But those who in the Christian community are referred to as the left behinds. And as long as we have those left behinds among us, injustice somewhere means we cannot have sustainable peace anywhere. As long as there is injustice somewhere, we can never have sustainable. So it is our duty. I think women have crusaded for justice because they believe it's their duty for their own sake, for the sake of those they love, to create a more compassionate society, a more inclusive society. Because when people have experienced kindness, not just in word, but in their own lives, the burden lightened, they tend to be kinder to society. Which for me is really the whole essence of Ubuntu. I am because you are. I won't let you suffer because through your suffering, I will suffer myself. Women in this country have also participated in creating the national framework in ending now. Women have participated in this country in creating a national legal framework that moves us towards equality. And for me, I think the women we should really celebrate without any reservations is what I refer to as the Frini Chinwala generation. The Frini Chinwala generation, when it went to Parliament, it didn't go there to add numbers, glamour, color, and things like that. They were on a mission to entrench equality, to mainstream equality, not just gender equality, equality for everyone. We heard them. If you counted on any given day, what they said in their speeches. I hope you academics should do this. In America, they do that. When they just look at a congressman's speeches and just say, what do you stand for? They look at how many speeches have you ever given in Parliament, and what were those speeches about? We said, give women power, because when women get power, they use it to advance humanity. They use it to create a better world. The Frene-Chinwala generation did exactly that. They gave us a constitution that embraces a substantive notion of equality, and they fought for it. They brought in a lot of us academics to be part of that conversation. It didn't start in Parliament. It started with them going around the country, collecting the needs of women. And the one thing that they had, that I'm not sure if we still have, was to understand that there are issues that concern women just because they're women. Across race, across class, across nationality. And they worked together, and that's where I met a whole lot of women during the Charter Days and during the negotiations at Kempton Park, and then eventually in Parliament. That's why when they were excluded, in the second round of talks, when they were excluded, Kathy Albertine, myself and Mavivi Manzini decided this is not on, and we're able to call. Being academics, they didn't ask us, who are you? Are you a court of law? Are you that? We asked them to come to CALS to discuss their exclusion. All of them, different political parties, and to agree on how they're going to get themselves back there. And they came, and they agreed, and they went back to to request that they be allowed to be to have women representatives in the talk, and that happened. Meaning, unity is one of the things that has driven the crusade for equality and social justice among women, and just lastly, they gave us a constitution that embraces equality throughout. That constitution even mediated the potential harm that could be caused by culture, religion, and custom if those are not modernized. And that's why we made those changes to Section 212, Section 211 of the Constitution, etc. They gave us the Equality Act. What have we done? The Equality Act was passed through that generation in 1999. That Equality Act is probably the only act that was partially implemented. Chapter 5 of that act remains unimplemented. No explanation. That's the one about progressive pursuit of equality, imposing obligations for people to progressively take steps to promote equality. Incidentally, when I spoke to students here, we spoke about race. Earlier this morning, we spoke about residences. Most universities in South Africa have this requirement that to get to race, you must pass 70% above. I don't, with due respect, Professor, I think it's an irrational provision, because I think for me, when we were studying, residence was about need. It was not a reward for good studies. So you might really pass with 90%, but you have a car and your house is around the corner. And I got 50% and my house is in Mpumalanga. You get residence. And yes. No, but what I heard here is that has been mediated through this forum, this transformation forum. And if the Equality Act, Chapter 5, had been passed, all universities would be in the same boat where they've looked at other values, that, okay, you want this one, in your own way, you were trying to encourage students to pass, but there's this other value of embracing diversity, being equitable, etc. How do you mediate that? And there are universities where students are studying in toilets. We didn't study, sleeping in a toilet, literally sleeping in a toilet. And if this equality thing had been done, but that's my generation. So those are questions we have to ask ourselves. Women have always crusaded for justice. Women are crusading for justice. But at what point do we go back to their approach where we pull together so that there are things, we don't end up with things that fall through the cracks because we're not matching our conversations. We're not strengthening synergies between what you're doing in academia, what they're doing in parliament, and that we can do if there's humility. If you come to me and you say you are excluding certain women, I don't ask who are you, I don't account to you. I just look at what are you saying, and I look at how can we work together. Because Ubuntu is about me and you working together to create a better world. And if you enjoy a better world, my own world will be improved. Which is, you can't light a candle, or you can't light the path of another without automatically lightening your own. One of the things that the women that went into Parliament contributed towards was the Chapter 9 institution. Of course, everyone contributed, but they contributed to making sure that these institutions are strengthened. If you look at the Public Protector provisions, the 1993 Constitution differs vastly from the 1996 Constitution, because after 1996, they had now had a women's charter, they've now had more conversations around what would work to ensure that it mediates the exercise of power to prevent excesses and allows this country to move forward in terms of the constitutional promise. And from our side, we've played our part in trying to be true to the Constitution. And you know that we are supposed to investigate any alleged or suspected improper conduct in state affairs, report, and take appropriate remedial action. It's all about mediating power in the context of entrusted political power. Going forward, I just want to say thank you, firstly, for having this conversation, for including me and my team in this for including me and my team in this conversation, but also, more importantly, in understanding that each of us have a log in our hands. As our democracy moves on to the next 21 years, it needs my log and your log to make sure that the fire doesn't die. Because if the fire dies, we both will die. Thank you.
Advocate Madonsela, I think the most pleasurable part of your visit was watching students light up in your presence this morning. And I think in the same way, we lit up in the room because you validate us, you see us, but you challenge us. And for a university in the space where we are, you understand it's a difficult space. But you tell us that excellence is never excellent without equality. And we thank you for that, for living that, for contributing your log, and for humanizing justice for our country. So we are so thankful. We apologize that you had to leave your daughter and time with her in a difficult time for us. But we so appreciate it because we so needed this at Stellenbosch at this moment. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts, from everybody at this university. And we do hope that this will be an ongoing conversation and that being an alum will mean that we will see a lot of you. We have a small token of our appreciation, and then I want to thank some other people that made this conversation special, but I just want to thank. We'd like to thank management for making the logistics and this conversation possible. We especially would like to thank Professor Amanda Gous and the Women's Forum for not backing down in terms of getting this conversation before the end of Women's Month. And thank you for that, and thank you for the role of the Women's Forum. And I want to especially thank also Maureen Kennedy, who really worked hard behind the scenes and who is sometimes giving up a lot of her own wellness to take care of our university in difficult times. So thank you, Maureen, and thank you so much for all of the staff and student support. We look forward to more conversations like this. Thank you.